Sometimes I'm asked about the relationship between prayer, as we know it, and meditation. So prayer is based on a very interesting concept. In prayer, there's the concept that there is an almighty, omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent intelligence in the universe. And that omniscient intelligence knows absolutely everything and everything that needs to happen, except it might be helped along a little bit by me reminding it. And so I'm going to try to remind cosmic intelligence what it really needs to be doing. You know, please, God, I know that you're real busy with galaxies and things like that, and maybe making life appear everywhere, but you must have your limitations. And since you created me, let me remind you that my dog really needs to recover from its cancer. So please don't let my dog die from cancer. And you know, I know that normally you don't make exceptions to the way the laws of nature work, but if you could perform one of your miracles, that'd be really cool. And I hope that this has been helpful to you, God, because although you're omniscient and you know exactly what I'm thinking and exactly what's best for everything, I want you to change the course of history. If we don't want the course of history to be changed, then we don't pray. And so we're asking omniscient, almighty God to change history and make exceptions based on what? I'm a petitioner, and I'm petitioning you that I have, maybe by virtue of my acknowledging of you and saying you're great, you're omniscient, you're all capable and everything, and I've said all the good, right things about you, and I'm really sorry about the bad stuff I've done in my life, but if you're willing to make an exception, here I am laying myself before you and praying as a petitioner. Please make a difference here and make an exception to your usual rules. And there's something about this that is counter to its own intelligence. You know, I can pray, meaning, you know, that somehow I sense that the omniscient is not really quite all that omniscient. It needs my help to really, you know, figure out what should be done here. Now, meditation. Meditation is an experience of taking my individuality and then backing into, in an eyes closed position, backing into the unboundedness that finds itself one with cosmic intelligence. Not a being, but the state of being. That is to say, cosmic intelligence, that inherent intelligence embedded in what scientists call the unified field. The unified field is described in physics as one indivisible whole, and get this, conscious field. Quantum mechanics gives it the attribute of consciousness. Field that brings into being all forms and all phenomena and merges them into one giant storyline. That is the storyline of the sequential elaboration of ever greater sophistication over a period which we call time, and also in space and in time. And so then when I can align myself with that experience by I allow my individuality to melt into that unboundedness, then I sense what the unboundedness is up to. What is the agenda of that vast consciousness state? Ultimately, it is a process of evolution. And evolution, we can use one wonderful word in English. Evolution is inexorable. Look it up. It means something like uncompromising. Only evolution can be happening. Whether we can see it or we can't see it, ultimately, evolution is all that's happening. You know, when you were a little kid and your little dolly started to lose its hair from its little pinpoint hair follicle things, and you were thinking, no, it mustn't happen. My dolly mustn't lose its hair. I don't want a bald dolly. And then, you know, something else came along and somebody went whizzing by on their bicycle with the little streamers coming out of the handlebars. You suddenly thought, Dolly, forget about that. I want one of those things. And what happened? When you were 25, 26, 30 maybe, you didn't look back at the little dolly with the balding head and think, oh, my little dolly, was also terrible. You might look back on your earlier self smilingly, thinking, I must have evolved from that state. At that time, in that state of consciousness, that's all that mattered to me. But now, in this state of consciousness, I look back at that state of consciousness and I consider it very endearing and cute, but I'm not bound by little Dolly anymore. What was going to happen to little Dolly? At the time, that state of consciousness generated that reality. Now, my bigger reality, I've taken so many other things into account. And I find my joy and my pleasures in so many other evolutionary activities, like that ever-increasing growth of the expansion of consciousness is supposed to take us way beyond where we are now. How do we get that most highly expanded state all at once? We have to start transcending. To transcend means step beyond, step beyond. When we close our eyes and we practice Vedic meditation and we settle into that deep, unbounded status, we have that consciousness, that sense of, I can sense the future in the making. Not the future like looking down a telescope and saying, that's going to happen. I can look around at everything around me and I can see what are the things that are disintegrating. What are the ways of thinking that are disintegrating? What are the ways of thinking that will be maintained because they're helpful, they continue to be helpful to evolution? What are the ways of thinking that are creative, innovative, inventive, finding new connections between existing things? So creation operator function, maintenance operator function, destruction operator function. And what are the relationships between these three? For the process of evolution, a steady state, a status quo, has to disintegrate in order for a new status quo to be built. So what is it that I rely upon? What is it that I can see with my own senses? See, taste, touch, smell, and hear. I sense the evolutionary process in action. My expectations are now conforming with what's actually happening. I don't have inaccurate expectations anymore. And because I don't have inaccurate expectations, when it comes to having to petition the big consciousness out there that's non-me, the non-self big consciousness that's not me. I might say that God is omnipresent, but if I consider it to be not me, I don't actually believe in this omnipresent thing. If I consider God to be omniscient, but I behave as if God will be informed by my point of view, then God can't possibly really be omniscient. If I believe God to be omnipotent, capable of everything, but He, usually He, by the way, won't be capable of anything unless I remind Him. He's going to be assisted by me reminding Him. Then I'm big into prayer. But if I'm experiencing oneness with that evolutionary force, I am one with that, then I might find that the necessity of prayer begins to dwindle away. Now, for those of you who are very attached to the idea of prayer, it's okay to keep praying. It won't harm your Vedic meditation, and your Vedic meditation won't harm your praying or anything. But it does give you a completely different perspective on the usefulness of any activity that separates you from that big intelligence. The more we separate ourselves from that, the more we feel like, petitioners who are unworthy. Unworthy petitioners who are looking for an exception. The more we meditate, the more we feel one with that almighty intelligence that's expanding and growing and making everything more sophisticated in the world. And we start to find our expectations aligning with that evolutionary force itself and allowing ourselves to be the agents of its progressive change without questioning it, without having to pray over it. This is more the reality of someone who meditates. And so, will prayer as a concept be questioned? I think perhaps I've done that in this little treatise of mine. And I hope that those of you who are very fond of the idea of separating universal intelligence from yourself and begging it to do stuff all the time won't feel too offended by my way of putting things. Jai Gurudev.